can come up and speak to it, and then hand them out. Hand them out anyway. But they should be in the budget presentation. But you could tell them if they finish quickly, they can come to dinner.
Yeah, it's a little light at darker.
$2:00. Okay, welcome everyone to our regular meeting of council, Monday, November 25th at 2:00. And before we start, we will just recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Sishat and Hoopachesit First Nations. Are there any late items identified by councillors? Seeing none. City Clerk, any late items?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then we have an agenda in front of us. Would somebody like to move approval?
Move to approve.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the special meeting of council held at 12:45 p.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on November 12th, 2019.
Move to adopt.
Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. That brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. Welcome forward.
Hi, my name is Chris Forbes. I've lived here all my life. Just something that I feel strongly about, and it really bothers me, is that our veterans are always surrounded by Christmas decorations. And right after Halloween, if you go into any store, all the Christmas decorations are up. And I was hoping to ask council to propose institute some kind of a bylaw whereby businesses that put up Christmas decorations before November 12th pay some kind of form of penalty in the form of a donation to the Puppy Fund. I'm thinking with a small business, maybe $50, right? If it's something like a Walmart, maybe $2.50 or something like that. I'm not looking to really penalize anybody, but our veterans need to be respected, and I find it very disrespectful. You see all these Christmas decorations before November 11th is even passed. So I'd appreciate if council would consider instituting some kind of a bylaw to that effect.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Anderson?
Don't start yet. Don't have that much here.
Don't start yet. Sounds like you have a full list today.
No.
Welcome, and sorry, I forgot to say, if you don't mind, just stating your name and address.
Before. Unemployment, homelessness, addictions, and having the highest crime levels has been stated in a recent article as to be a deterrent to the people considering investing and retiring in Port Alberni. In the last 10 years, I believe we've had 3 RCMP police chiefs. No doubt, I'm not saying they haven't worked hard, but I don't see any improvement, any changes, and I believe things are worse. Only solution I've heard really is to hire more police officers, and in my opinion, it's not going to do anything to help the situation. I feel that the police have one hand behind their back, tied behind their back. The court systems, the lack of provincial, federal government seriously addressing the above problems. They appear to simply take the big city problems, disperse them amongst the municipalities, disperse the homeless and the people with addictions, and to places like Port Alberni, and allow us to try and resolve the problems for them. I met with the local needle exchange, trying to find a little bit more about what they do and how they felt they were benefiting the people with addictions. And so basically they hand out the needles. The people go buy their drugs from their favorite drug dealer in town. If they shoot up, I'm sorry if I'm using the poor terminology, but it doesn't matter. It's what they're doing. And they overdose, there's someone at the needle exchange that will assist them, which is a positive thing. Many of them don't do that, and they shoot up behind a dirty fence that's visible to the people on 3rd Avenue coming back and forth, or they take the needles somewhere. I walk my dog at Dry Creek every day. And I'm tired, simply tired of the garbage, the shopping carts, the people sleeping at times, not every day, so you can't go down there and say, I didn't see it, so it's okay. Sleeping under canvases and on tents, and often find discarded needles, etc. The pool that was dredged recently, I understand from a contractor that they didn't fulfill everything they wanted to do, and I'm glad the city did that. It was a positive thing because there was needles at the bottom of that pool. People sit at the side and shoot up there. I've seen it. It's first-hand knowledge that I see it. It's a beautiful park, and many dog owners walk their dogs and let their dogs run there. And a number of people don't go beyond the open area because they're afraid of, I don't think they have a reason to be, but they're afraid of going back. I'm tired of what appears to be the lack of a resolve to any of these issues over the years, and it's only getting worse. At times I believe we are enabling people with addictions rather than treating them. I'm tired of hearing that they're suffering from a disease and not an addiction. And I expect that I'll get a lot of negative feedback from what I'm saying, but so be it. I'm all right with that. In question period, I'm going to ask what the city is doing about a plan of action to deal with these issues. I expect there will be a plan because this is not a new issue. And our mayor, in her response to a recent article about our high rate of crime, did not respond, which I'm glad to see. This is a positive remark. I was glad to see did not respond with denials and calls of unfair services. If I understood it right, she just simply acknowledged that it was a problem, and that is a huge, in my opinion, step forward in the right direction. In the past, it's always been denial. So I just believe that we do what our mayor had done. He acknowledged the fact that there's truth to what was said, and you form a plan, an aggressive plan of action to try and resolve it. I understand it's a hard problem, and we're fighting federal, provincial governments. But I would like to know at question period what we divide as a community to start dealing with things so we are seeing some changes. I'm tired of it.
Thank you.
And it's affecting.
I do have to cut you off now. You are out of time.
I know. It's affecting your community and people that may want to move
For
here.
sure. Thank you.
It's out of time for me too, because I think this has gone on far too long, and thank you for extending my.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. And I want to thank Neil for extending our public input period to a longer distance. Thank you, Neil. First thing John Douglas, sorry, former mayor, councillor, resident of Cameron Heights, Port Alberni. First thing I want to do is just extend a thank you to all of you folks who sit on our city council, to all of our great staff at the city who keep things working, to all the great volunteers in our community and the citizens that keep this community running. I know it's a very difficult job and thankless at times and rewarding at other times, and just want to be one of the voices who every once in a while pops up and says, thank you. So thanks for what you do. And I want to invite people to this dinner and dialogue program that we've had, and I've got extra copies here if anybody wants any. I've left some with your CAO Tim over there. I've been able to talk to a few of you over the last few weeks about it, and it is a ticketed event, and tickets are running out. It's at through the Chamber of Commerce, put on behalf of the Opioid Dialogue Program in our community, and as well with the support of the Port Alberni Shelter Society. It's going to be a really good event. We're bringing international research that we have researched from Portugal, Italy, parts of Europe, United States, and Canada. And we'll be doing 2 presentations on those subjects and allowing for public dialogue in between. And on top of that, it's a nourishing event. Hence, that's why it's ticketed, because we have to pay for the food that the Barclay is going to produce. But it is going to be nourishment, so we're calling it Dinner and Dialogue. So I just wanted to pop in briefly to let you know about it, and if you can spread the word to your colleagues, and hope you can manage to come by.
Can you tell us when it is? It's tomorrow, right?
It's Wednesday the 27th. That good detail. Wednesday. The 27th of November, 5:30 p.m. And it's like your regular chamber events that many of you have attended in the past. It'll start at 5:30. It'll end around 8 o'clock, 8:30. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Would any other members of the public like to speak at public input period? Thank you.
Don't be shy. I'll get you guys somewhere.
Come on forward, Aaron.
Thank you. Aaron Brevick, 2840 Highmore Road, Port Alberni. I just wanted to also say thank you to staff and city for everybody's hard work. A couple of my questions might be addressed. It's regarding number 4 on your agenda with the cannabis regulations. I noticed at the beginning it says cannabis cultivation and processing, and we addressed this a little bit last time. As I read through the regulations, I don't see any other mention of processing other than the title. And I just want to remind everybody that I am involved in a site-specific rezoning that includes processing. So just wanted to make that one visible to everybody. And also, again, to point out that a lot of these regulations, whether or not staff, I'm not sure how many people are involved in the actual writing of stuff before it comes before staff, but the federal government has a lot of things in place. And on number 3, it says, in regards to the cannabis nursery facilities, it says no dried flower. I need you guys to understand that that could be a serious conflict for your bylaw department that would result in more paperwork and problems than necessary, because to produce seeds, you need to produce dried flower. But your dried flower is regulated to 5 kilograms annually. So just so you guys are aware, and that flower is also not for sale, but federal regulations of the construction of the building require smell and all the rest of it. So just so you guys are aware, when writing the restrictions regarding these, please do not be overburdensome and restrictive in regards to building setbacks and stuff, also considering we have an old town. That's all. Just a couple minors. Thank you so much. Oh, and I'm working with some people this week to bring a new event to town, similar to what the Kinsmen do with their soapbox race. We're looking at a mini kind of regatta on the canal. We still have to speak to a couple people. I would love to speak with the Marine Search and Rescue guys about this, involving a bathtub race, possibly from China Creek up to Clutesy or even the Orange Bridge as a finish line. So if I could maybe grab one of you guys after, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. That brings us to the end of public input period. So next we have delegations, and I'm very happy to introduce Paul Cumberland, the Director of Administration, in attendance to join myself in presenting the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary Administrative Excellence Medal. So come on forward. You can come to the podium, yes. If you want to start by just introducing however you have, and then I have a couple of comments as well.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. I'm Paul Cumberland with RCMSR, Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue headquarters down in Souk, and I'm privileged to be here to participate in celebrating Ian Arkley. He has been awarded a National Coast Guard Auxiliary Medal for administrative excellence. Our organization can't function without guys like Ian. In his 34 years of volunteering with us, he's been on 171 missions, saved, or we don't attribute saving lives to individuals. I can safely say that he is a part of the team that has brought home people safely so that their parents don't have to deal with a coroner stat. So that's thrilling, but we're here also to celebrate his architecture of and leadership in the station.
And I just wanted to add that we all know we're really privileged in our community to have a lot of incredible volunteers. I think we are unlike a lot of other communities in just how the commitment that we see from so many volunteers in our community. But I just wanted to say a special thank you to Ian for all that he's contributed, and personally for making me a better driver also, because we all benefit from that. So thank you, Ian, and really proud to have you in our community.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to stand at the front for a picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, so moving on, nothing under unfinished business. So on to staff reports. Item 1, accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Acting Director of Finance dated November 25, 2019 be received, and checks numbering 144919 to 145013 inclusive in payments of accounts totaling $983,467.06 be approved.
Is there a seconder? Second. Any comments? All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the city clerk, council regular meeting times. City clerk, did you want to just briefly speak to this, and then I can also.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we approach our organisational meeting on December 2nd, just asking for council's thoughts and input around the start time for regular council meetings. As council is aware, we shifted to a 2 p.m. start time in 2019. In 2018, we had a couple of meetings during the summer where we did them at 2 o'clock. Otherwise, they were at 7 p.m. Meetings are all live streamed now, and they are all available on our website as well. They're archived for people to watch them at any time. So before we introduce the meetings at our organisational meeting, just asking for some thoughts and input about whether we continue with the 2 p.m. time.
Thank you. So, Council, I remembered recently that when we switched to 2 p.m. meetings, I said, we'll do a check-in after 6 months. And that 6 months just flew by really quickly. And then the next 6 months also flew by really quickly. So we are now at a year. And I just wanted us to have an opportunity as a council to discuss how we feel about the meeting times, if it works for us. And then I wanted to bring it up as a topic of conversation as well, in case members of the public want to give input at question period or over the next, until our organizational meeting, so that we can receive some input on that. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with our city clerk. I think we're a lot sharper. We're more alert at 2 o'clock rather than at 7 o'clock. And I feel as a recycled councillor that those 7 o'clock days when they went to 10 o'clock, it was more to let's just get this done and get the heck out of here. So no, I'm all for the 2 o'clock meetings.
Great, thank you. Any other? Councillor Poon?
Thank you. I also agree with Councillor Washington. I think we need to be making decisions when we are awake and we're not falling asleep. So this is, I'm all for the 2 p.m. meetings.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, the 2 p.m. meetings work and seem to work for this group, but I think a bigger question that we should probably look at prior to the end of our term is how do we make running for city council a little bit more approachable for the average person that gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and gets home at 6 o'clock at night, and we go to committee meetings at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. People would end up losing a small fortune if they had to go through all that. So I think it works for this group right now, but prior to the next election, I think that it would be incumbent upon us to sit down and figure out ways how we could make it a little bit easier for more people to run for council.
Councillor Corbeil, I think that's a great comment, and I think the key here is that it works for this group, and I think it's important to remember and remind the public that this is a year-to-year schedule, and if it didn't, if one of us all of a sudden had a different employment situation and it didn't work, we could accommodate that as well. So I think that's a really important topic, and maybe there is more that we can do toward the end of this term to open it up to more people, because I know that certainly was a challenge for me when I started on council, and probably is a disqualifying factor for a lot of people. Councillor Solda, did you have any comments? Okay. Councillor Paulson.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, we're not going to make a motion, actually. We're just going to receive the report because we want to. Oh, okay. Well, I would prefer that we just receive the report and then we leave it open in case members of the public want to give feedback before, because we have, I think our organizational meeting is next week, so we have a week until then. So if members of the public want to give input before then, I think that's, but if you have any comments, we'll take your comments.
No,
I think that the 2 o'clock works. We should do it again. But we need to include the 7 o'clock as a standby or for a rare exceptional meeting or something. So.
And for budget meetings as well.
Yeah,
Great.
for sure.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also prefer the 2 p.m. start times. 7 o'clock is okay, but when it gets to be 10 o'clock at night, we're not sharp and we're tired and we just want to get it over and done with. But I think what hasn't been mentioned is the saving on staff time by having the 2 o'clock meetings. The staff does not have to work in the evening, so it does save expenses as well on our budget.
Thank you very much. Okay. Seeing no more comments, would anyone like to move receipt of the report? Okay.
Since I can't make the other one.
That's great. Well, to be clear, you can make whatever motion you want. Okay. And then again, just to, if any members of the public want to give input, because a big piece of this, although this does work for our group, and I think we have had really good attendance at our regular meetings of council, a big piece of this as well is being able to engage with members of the public on a regular basis. So definitely interested in hearing from more people on this topic before our organizational meeting. On the motion to receive the report, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 3 from our city clerk, Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society requests for funds for glass replacement. CAO?
Madam Mayor, I'll speak to the clerk's report. Council will recall that in August of this year there was some vandalism on city-owned rail equipment. Primarily some windows were broken, but that wasn't the only damage. And the Industrial Heritage Society, who maintains that equipment for the city, has requested that the city provide funding to replace the glass. The cost estimates provided are, the lowest cost estimate is $9,072 for that. The city's insurance policy has a $10,000 deductible, so it wouldn't make any sense to activate the insurance policy on this. The president of the Industrial Heritage Society is in the room, Pete Geddes. If you have any questions about the trains themselves and the repair, that kind of thing, I'm sure he's happy to answer those. If you have any questions about the funding, then I or Acting Director of Finance would answer those. It's proposed that if council approves this expenditure, the money come from the city's contingency fund.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Solta.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni reimburse the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society a total of $9,072 for the train, coach, glass repairs, and funding from the contingency. Okay. Councillor Paulson.
I would love for Mr. Geddes to give us just an update on where you're at with that. And is it salvageable, and is the work moving forward?
If you could just come forward.
Take your time.
Where we are with it is we haven't done anything with the coaches because we don't have the funding. So that's why we proposed, or why we asked for some funding so that we can do that. The work will not be done until the spring, but we figured we better get on with it right now. So that's where we are with that. That's just one part of getting things active again and the trains running. We're still working on the steam engine to get it going, and I guess I can't say anything, but I'm sure council understands the problems that we're having with that because they've just gone through the same thing with the same people. But we're working ahead and we're getting there. So, okay.
Other questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Something just doesn't seem fair in all this, that the youth that did the vandalism were caught and ended up cleaning some stuff up, but yet somehow the city ends up having to pick up the bill. And I don't know, was there any opportunity for those kids to work off what they did or something like that?
Yes, they were actually the parents, the mother, the two of them were very good, and they phoned up several times to want to know when they could come and help and clean up and do some other work. And they have been there, I forget how many times, but they were down and cleaned up their mess and then helped clean up some of the other stuff around the stage or the roundhouse on the tracks. So they did put in, and one of the young guys, his mother handed us some money, and that was his allowance for about 4 months. So talking to anything else happening with them, I don't think too much will. It's up to the Crown Council, and I don't imagine that they're going to do anything for retribution. That's the impression I get anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Geddes, I understand that you had a GoFundMe page to try and raise funds. Was that successful? And if it was, where was that money spent at?
That money is not spent yet, but that has been sort of put aside. It was, I guess, successful. We had, I believe we got $3,200, and that's been earmarked to replace the damage that happened before the glass damage for the seats and things. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, item 4 from the Manager of Planning, we have cannabis cultivation zoning, public engagement summary, and proposed recommendations. Of course, this is just from our last meeting, and I'll get Manager of Planning just to speak to it briefly again, and then I would imagine if we have questions from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So yes, 2 weeks ago you received a presentation from myself and a student from the Vancouver Island University Master of Community Planning program, who we were working in partnership on this project for the last 4 months. Together we were able to summarize the research and public engagement findings that we had conducted with regards to information about zoning for cannabis cultivation and processing. So attached in the council package, and what's up on the screen there, is the report that also summarizes that information and lays out the recommendations from staff and from the planning school that we'd like you to consider today, and hopefully give us some direction on how to move forward. So as proposed, the approach that staff are recommending would allow certain cannabis cultivation and processing facilities based on the scale and type in industrial zones, agricultural zones, and limited commercial zones. You can see the map is up there again, and hopefully with you today. Our recommendations would exclude large-scale outdoor facilities, and we recall from the last discussion we had about this that seems like there was maybe some hesitation on behalf of council to probably not allow any outdoor facilities within city limits. So I think that's reasonable. We are also proposing the use of setbacks, buffer zones, development permit areas, and other regulations that would regulate the quality of development and hopefully mitigate impacts on surrounding areas. So hopefully once council is able to give us a high-level indication of where to go with zoning for cannabis cultivation and processing, we'll then prepare bylaws and policy changes, bring those to the Advisory Planning Commission to review. That'll come to council for review. There'll be a public hearing, and then council will be the decision. Once that policy is actually in front of you, you can probably have a bit more meaty discussion, but we're really looking for a high-level direction at this point to get us going on preparing those changes.
Great. Okay, are there questions for the Manager of Planning? Councillor Paulson.
Just some comments. I think you reiterated some of the comments from the last meeting. I'm a little bit biased because I've actually toured an indoor facility, which I was extremely impressed with. My personal feeling in reading through this is I would almost like to eliminate reference to outdoor grow at all, period. And I would also like to remove, personally, I would like to remove our A1 zone. We don't have a lot of A1 zone. And if we ever got a chance to use our A1 zone, I think it would be better suited to food production than it would be to cannabis conduct. Not that I have anything against the cannabis industry, it's just that we don't have a lot of it. In the one area, the largest A1 area, I think, is the one across the river there. And I was sitting the other day thinking about the potential for aroma, if you will. And I do know that from time to time we get prevailing wind that brings in aroma from the sewage lagoon
Certain
area.
smells.
Something smells rotten in Denmark, and I just know that that particular area may cause us some grief in the general public. So within city limits, I like the recommendations. I'm just really not sure about outdoor period, and especially our A1 designation. I would prefer to remove that for the time being, but that's only my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also agree with Councillor Paulson. I would prefer not to have any outdoor growing within city limits. I don't think the public would want that, and something that I don't want, personally, fields of cannabis. My other question is, can we maybe do a combination? You gave a couple examples here from other areas. I'm fine with allowing micro cultivation facilities and cannabis nursery facilities, as you have written, but for the larger facilities, the standard cultivation facilities, anything more than 200 square meters in size, if there's something that we can have a little bit more control over, have each application come to council just so we can vet it and make sure that it's appropriate for the area and where we want to see it. The problem we have in our community is we have residential, so much residential next to our industrial zones. It could be really difficult just to give a blanket okay. That's my thoughts.
Could you speak to the development permit process and how that could somewhat help with that concern?
Absolutely, yeah. So right now, the city doesn't have development permit areas for industrial zones. That might be something we want to think about changing as part of this or as the next OCP review. But what we're recommending is that there would be specific development permit criteria introduced attached to the rezoning so that any of, if an applicant was developing in a zone that was permitted, they'd still have to go through a development permit process before receiving a building permit. And that would help control things like form and character and any sort of issues like that you'd want to see. So the council would get to see it. It wouldn't be the zoning, but it would be at least some control over how that building appeared and interacted with the area and was controlled that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, do you have any comments?
No, this time.
Okay. Councillor Solda?
I'm actually agreeing with my fellow two councillors on agriculture land and that, so I'm in the same frame.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil?
Yeah, and I also agree with the outdoor growing. But the question I have is this development permit, could that take care of the ventilation and the scrubbers? Madam Mayor went to a facility back east and there was no smell at all. Can we control that with this development permit or anything within our control?
Yeah.
So from my understanding, a lot of that is controlled by Health Canada in terms of the actual requirements in order to receive a license. I can certainly look into what we can do additionally and above and beyond that. Really, our development permits are more focused at this point on form and character, but I can certainly see what I could do. I can take that into mind and make sure that that's something we try to consider.
So with what Health Canada looks after, are they able to ensure that any facilities that are built within the city limits do not give off odor?
I can't speak to what they're able to assure, but I do know that there's very high standards with regards to ventilation, air quality, and assuring that it's kind of a very high quality, well-maintained facility with minimal impacts on the area.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but my understanding as well is that the Health Canada standards that they have to meet in order to get a license for the building and types of ventilation and air scrubbers, that kind of thing, are very high. And some of the existing operations that we have in our community, like I know there's one near my business that gives off quite a smell. seems like every single day. And that's not a Health Canada approved facility. So I think some of the concerns that we hear from members of the public are about facilities that are not Health Canada regulated. They're personal grow licenses, and maybe a culmination of multiple personal grow licenses. So that's where I think some of the misconception and concern comes from in the community. And that said, I think as well that there are bad examples out there of Health Canada approved facilities. So at the regional district, we've certainly heard of a few examples that of buildings that are Health Canada approved, not anywhere near our area, but in other parts of the country that, you know, are causing nuisance to their area. So I think that when that kind of thing happens, then that is potentially an interaction with Health Canada and talking about the licensing and whether they're meeting the standards of the licensing. We might not have the direct ability to control that, but there is a regulator in place. And so I think if we had a facility like that, we'd be trying to work with Health Canada to bring it into compliance. Thanks. Councillor Poon?
Thank you. I don't take much of an issue with the outdoor growing. I think that the proposed approach is well thought out, and I think, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people in the community, and we do need economic diversity, and this, I believe, is our opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any of these ventures would be government approved, am I correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So even with the outdoor being agricultural, that has to be government approved before anything can happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you for the comments, and I wanted us to take an extra couple of weeks to think about this, just to have another opportunity to hear from members of the public, and to really make sure that when we do move forward, we as a council are confident in the zoning that we set, and we're not going to, have somebody come out and complain about an application next to them and cause us to change the zoning or reconsider what we have set out. I want to make sure that we go through a process and we're comfortable sticking with it. That said, I do have an issue with the outdoor cultivation, because outdoor growing is outdoor growing. And I think that from what I've read online, trying to find examples of other communities and how they're dealing with cannabis cultivation, a lot of the concerns that I see are to do with outdoor growing and the odors and the issues that come with that potentially, and non-regulated or non-Health Canada approved facilities. So I feel quite confident personally in welcoming into our community Health Canada approved facilities. I know that it's never going to be perfect, but I do think that we at least have a government body there that that knows what they're doing, that has a strict set of regulations, and if we welcome these facilities into our community, I think we are going to get quality developments. I think maybe there is place for outdoor grows in our community, but I think we don't need to start with that today. I think it's a big enough step to welcome into our community possibly large-scale cannabis cultivation, and if we want to reconsider outdoor grows, I think we could do that at some point in the future. And if we have an application, or if somebody is, you know, interested in coming into our community, we could restart that conversation. I hear the concern as well around agricultural land, and I'm not sure that taking out agricultural land is as necessary if we're not allowing outdoor grows. So interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that. The regional district is having a challenge because on agricultural land reserve, which is different than RA1, they can't regulate outdoor grows. But for us, I don't believe that's the case. We can regulate outdoor grows on A1. So if somebody wanted to come in and put a indoor cultivation facility on agricultural land, I'm curious for the two people who spoke about that, if that would be a concern. Like, is the concern more around wanting to reserve that land for food production, or is it just about the outdoor growing? If either of you want to give your feedback.
My concern is just for the outdoor growing.
Okay.
Just because it does, from what I understand, I don't know for sure, but from what I understand, this is where the odor comes from, is the outdoor growing, and I just don't think we need that in our community.
For sure. Okay. Councillor Paulson?
Well, I think I'm in the same boat there with regards to the outdoor growing, and I just threw in the comment about we don't have a lot of agricultural land within our city limits, and I just threw it out there that it might be better preserved.
Yeah.
And some future date for growing food rather than cannabis.
Yep.
But I'm at the will of the group.
I'm wondering if this is something we want to hear an opinion from, like I'm hearing definitely a consensus, some people okay with outdoor growing, but I think more of a consensus around not going with outdoor growing right now. But I'm wondering if we want to hear from our economic development manager on A1 and whether or not he feels there's potentially a need for that land or not to be included. On the spot opinion.
I think from what I understand that a male cannabis plant can pollinate the female from quite some distance. And I've actually heard people attending the open houses say if an outdoor grow ever came up in my neighborhood, I'd just simply take some male plants there and let them pollinate and therefore destroy the crop. So I think, I had been thinking that our 17 acres, which is behind the Pacific Rim Mall, might be a site for it, but given the Agricultural Land Commission rules around that, a proponent would actually have to create a floor above the dirt in order to go forward with an initiative like that. So I think there are other issues and other zones, but as far as outdoor goes, I think council is probably on the right track.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, who would like to read these motions? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I'll move that the report from Manager of Planning dated October 20th, 2019 be received.
All in favor? Carried.
I'll move that City Council support the recommended approach to zoning for cannabis cultivation. Oh, hang on. So are we going to exclude the outdoor one then?
Yeah, I think we
For
could
now?
read the first three and
Yeah,
then
I'll read the first three.
decide if we want to read the
and
outdoor.
Okay. I'll move that City Council support the recommended approach to zoning for cannabis cultivation and direct staff to prepare a bylaw reflecting those changes as follows. Regarding indoor facilities, greenhouse or warehouse, 1, that standard cultivation facilities, anything more than 200 meters squared in size, be allowed in the light industry M1, medium industry M2, and heavy industry M3 zones. And 2, that micro-cultivation facilities, anything up to 200 square meters in size, be allowed in the light industry M1, medium industry M2, heavy industry M3, service commercial C3, and highway commercial C4 zones. And 3, that cannabis nursery facilities limited to 50 square meters in size and only the production of seedlings and clones and no dried flowers be allowed in the light industry M1, medium industry M2, heavy industry M3, service commercial C3, highway commercial C4, and agriculture A1 zones.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, and questions? Councillor?
I'm not sure how to do this, but I would like to move that we remove and agriculture A1 zones.
So you would make an amendment?
I would make an amendment to the third motion, number 3, to remove and agriculture A1 zones.
Second. Okay, and discussion on the amendment? Is manager planning, is there any, you know, I mean, I would think that the impact of that is reasonably minimal, given that we're only looking at nursery facilities for that section anyways.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Any further comments?
Can I just make one?
Absolutely.
To address Mr. Brevik's comment about it should say cultivation and processing facilities. So I do apologize for that.
Great. Okay.
So I think that's the spirit of the discussion.
That's
but
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just wanted to be clear.
So on the amendment to remove A1, all in favor? Carried. Sorry, opposed.
Opposed.
I never call opposed. Thank you. Carried. And so on the main motion as amended, are there any further comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, carried. Thank you. And does anyone wish to make the motion for outdoor facilities? Okay, wonderful. Just want to thank the manager of planning for you know, all of the work that has been done on this. I know we have a little bit more here. I assume we have to read this part also. Yes. But I think this has been a really good process to go through, and I'm happy with how much public feedback we got throughout this. So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Does someone want to read those last three?
I'll move that staff propose definitions for the types of cannabis facilities that are consistent with Health Canada's definitions, and that staff include recommendations for building setbacks, buffer zones, and regulations to help mitigate noise and odor concerns, and that any cannabis production facility be required to obtain a development permit regarding building form and character to ensure a high-quality development and mitigate impacts to the visual landscape.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 5 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, Grandview Road Walkway Construction Update. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I was asked to provide an update on that particular project. There was somebody stood up, I guess, at the last meeting and said they weren't aware of that the construction was imminent. And we had indeed started that day. So we were able to fit this project in with some good weather and in between some other projects. It has been on council's agenda for probably 3 years anyway. And it was funded this year for $125,000 to complete that work. Bulk of that work is now complete, hoping to get it paved this week. So we're just there right now, cutting the edge and getting ready for asphalt. While I'm standing here, I guess I probably will update you on the Gertrude Bridge joint replacement. That's hoping to start next week. Contractors got all his parts and pieces ready to go. Hoping to be in and out of there in 3 weeks. Yeah, you'll probably see some notices going out extending or looking like the project's extended through January, but their intent is certainly to get in and out quickly. For the public, there will be I don't need that. Just play with it. No. Yeah, disruptions to traffic. Certainly, Gertrude Street will be down to 2 lanes for the duration of that project. We will be eliminating the left turn up Roger, so southbound traffic. Again, we'll have lots of signage indicating that that's happening. People will have to go around Victoria Quay and up Roger from that way to go. Otherwise, you can go straight through. Just have to with the proximity of the bridge to the intersection. We'll make some timing changes as well to the lights at the intersection to make things go smoother. Yeah, I just hope the public bears with us during that period. We'll get that work done.
Okay. Thank you very much for the update. That's right. Are there any questions from council? Okay. Just a question about the Grandview Road project.
Yep.
Budget was $125,000. Do we know if we are under that budget?
I don't at this point because all the bills aren't in, obviously, and all the wages and materials and stuff. But I can tell you there was good news recently. Was able to get some funding because we weren't able to proceed on the Beaver Creek Road walkway, which had a funding component from ICPC's road improvement program. And in their world, if you don't use it, you lose it. You just keep reapplying. So I said, is there a possibility of moving that over to Grandview? They said yes. I think I was able to get $22,900 for that project. So that'll offset some of our costs on that.
That's great. Good. Okay, thank you very much for the update. Somebody like to move receipt of the report?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Okay. And item 6 from our Economic Development Manager, Port Alberni Age Friendly Initiative, funded by UBCM.
Madam Mayor, councillors, this item was referred to staff for comment after the contractor made a presentation at the last council meeting. So the report that's in front of you makes a number of observations about the process and where we're at, and does recommend that we complete only our 2019 age-friendly funding commitments at this point in time. I'm pleased to answer any questions that might come up.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Deacon, you state that there's another reason that you don't want to do it is regional district is also doing one, and you state that having two relatively similar surveys in the public domain at the same time will be confusing. I'm wondering why the city and the regional district maybe don't work together and how one project, why is there two projects? It seems to be a lot of duplication of services and money.
Great question.
Thank you.
We were not aware that the regional district had applied for funding for their initiative, and they weren't aware that we had applied until a couple of months ago. And the regional district is doing an age-friendly action plan, and they've got a very tight timeline on this. So they intend to be finished everything that they're doing by the end of April in 2020. They had received funding for 2019 and then applied for an extension because they were running behind. This awareness that we've each been funded to do a similar project, and I say similar, I mean somewhat similar. Our application was for an assessment, and initially we thought that at the end of the assessment period, 1 year, we would have enough information to then go ahead and develop an action plan. The contractor doing the work doesn't think that's the case, that we should be gathering more information. The regional district's on a fast track as a result of this, and also the fact that they're contemplating submitting an application for a housing needs assessment, which we received funding for in 2019, and we haven't done yet. They are, I think, going to be presenting to their board an option that they should be working with us on the housing needs assessment. They are hoping that if we conclude the 2019 age-friendly assessment, we will give them that information and it will feed their action plan going forward. They recognize that whether you live in the city's limits or somewhere in the electoral areas, that you're probably going to be using services in the city's boundaries. So there should have been, could have been some coordination between us if we had known. And we've made a point of being aware of what one another is going to be applying for going forward, to see if there's a need for collaboration, an opportunity for collaboration, a way of saving money and time.
If we conclude this project, do you think we have enough information to develop an action plan somewhere down the road?
I think that we should have enough information to address the 3 priorities that the contractor identified, has identified to this point in time, and that between that and the work that the regional district will be doing, there will be some recommendations that we can implement as part of an action plan. And this funding is available on a yearly basis, so there is, if at the end of our assessment of what we've received by way of a report on the deliverables and the action items, we think there isn't enough information, we can go and apply again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Poon?
I'm not sure how to phrase this question, but it seems like a lot of these assessments that we do and studies that we do don't end up giving us much to do, I guess. Is there something, are there measures that you're taking to make sure that this project doesn't just end up on the shelf and is actually useful?
We have a number of reports that have recommendations that and dating back a number of years that I think are still applicable, and it's a matter of having somebody decide that they're going to champion that recommendation and get the funding in the budget if that's required to go forward. I think there's enough concern about, now age-friendly is supposed to be friendly across all age groups, not just the seniors. Truth of the matter is that pretty much every community tends to focus primarily on the seniors groups because of the demographics, the demographic change, that we have the tsunami of gray hair. And I think that there's enough in the way of concern and interest for seniors' well-being that if there are recommendations that have are obvious as a result of the work that's been done on the assessment, that we'll look at implementing them.
Okay. Councillor Poon, I think that, this is not a reflection on you certainly, but I think the concern that I'm hearing is one that I've certainly had at times as well. We do these reports. We don't tend to, or we before we even get an opportunity to action them, we are doing a follow-up report. So, and this is an example because one has been done, I believe, an assessment in 2014, and now another assessment coming up in our budget today. There's a $10,000 update to the active transportation plan, and that was done in 2014, and it cost $20,000. And that one we actually have implemented quite a bit of, but it feels sometimes, and I think certainly to the public, like we do a report, we pay for an update to a report, we do another report because it's dated, we do an update to a report, and we're not necessarily spending as much money actioning them as we are on the actual reports. And I think a piece of that is us making sure that we are linking the work that we're doing back to our reports so that people understand when we are taking action from them. And then another thing that we may want to consider is doing a review of those reports that we have in-house. having maybe a session with council to make sure that, to see which ones we do feel are still relevant rather than paying for updates to them. So somewhat off topic from this specific one, but a concern I think that all of us here on a regular basis is that we spend a lot of time doing reports and not enough time actioning.
We
Yeah.
we made the observation to UBCM when we were applying for the funding that an assessment had been done, and I think it was 2013, that in a 5-year period, although it may not seem like much has changed, the shift of people into an older age bracket has continued. Technologies have changed. Other municipalities have taken steps that need to be considered, and UBCM saw fit to fund another assessment as opposed to say to us, hey, you guys applied for funding 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and you haven't moved forward with the recommendations there. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, there are other reports where I think recommendations are still appropriate, and some where they are not. And UBCM, now again, that previous one was an assessment rather than an action plan.
Okay. Other comments? Councillor Solda.
It's interesting hearing because it's been going on forever. When you do a study or an assessment, whatever you want to call whatever the project is at the time, and a lot of these studies have been done to be ready for any grant funding and stuff like that. And unfortunately, they sit on the shelf and no grant funding comes forward, or we don't get the grant. So they sit there for the next grant and so forth. And then by the time 5 years has rolled around, we need to do an update one. So this has been going on forever like this. And then of course you get the higher powers, which the FCM, AVICC, or the UBCM comes, hey, why haven't you moved forward on that? Although there might be things that come out of the reports that we have touched base with, but not enough to satisfy the higher power. And I agree with the mayor that we should take a look what's on our shelf, and let's do a reassessment of them if the council wants to go forward. And it's no reflection on the economic development because they're doing what council has wished, and council's stuck because we haven't got the grants, and that's one of the big things. And then the public gets really frustrated because didn't we spend so much money on this? And yes, we have. So I just want to touch base on that. So thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Councillor Paulson, do you want to read the motion here?
Thanks, Mum.
You're welcome.
I'd like to move the council direct staff to complete the 2019 age-friendly funding commitments and not proceed with an application for additional funding in the 2020 calendar year at this time.
Is there a seconder? Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 7 from the CAO, 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan introduction. Mm-hmm.
Madam Mayor, I don't get to come up here much anymore. So, Madam Mayor, Council, we have a brief presentation for you. This is one of those periods, one of those events in the year, in the cycle, that we get a bit of a milestone cycle where we get to present, in this case, a draft 5-year financial plan. And Rosalind McCauley, the Acting Director of Finance, is just handing out a refreshed document for you, which I think looks a lot like a document you already had in your hands. this one? Is it 2040? Wow. So it's a 25-year financial plan, 2020 to 2040. Yeah. Thanks to me. If it looks like the ink is wet still, it's because staff have been working evenings and weekends on getting these documents ready. Thank you, Rosalind. So as I said, we have a presentation, and I'll start it off, and then the acting director of finance will step in and speak to some slides, and then the deputy clerk will close it out for us. So we provided council with some hard copy reports, and I believe those are in your inboxes in a digital form as well. And after this meeting, it's our intention to make those documents public on the city's website. Yeah, so without further ado, I'll walk you through the documents. And our plan today was not to get into the data in the documents, but to orient you to the documents so that you know what it is that you got in your hand. And you'll have an opportunity, lots of opportunity to ask questions and make changes and that sort of thing. So this is a draft plan. It is, there's an overview of the things you want to talk about today. You can see that slide is brought to you by Engineering and Public Works on the footer. So factors to consider. So in building this, this draft financial plan, staff considered 4 factors, and or 4 drivers, if you like. So we started with the 2019 to 2023 5-year financial plan that this council adopted earlier this year. And when you adopted that, you'll recall that you didn't have your strategic plan in place, so you adopted what I would call a maintenance budget, knowing that this year you're going to roll up your sleeves, start earlier than previous years, and really delve into making this budget yours, the next 5-year plan yours, and especially around your strategic initiatives that are in the strategic plan. So we started off with the 4 years that were in the current budget, and used that as our starting point. And you may or may not recall that basically the 3 of the years in that plan came from a time when we were moving forward on increases of 1% per year over a 5-year period. So that was those are somewhat austerity budget years. They were fairly lean. And we made some good changes, I think, in those previous years to get to those numbers, to enable those numbers. So the second factor we considered in the 5th year of this plan, 2024, it reflects our anticipated, our expectations of what inflation will be over 2023. So we largely added the 2% inflationary buffer with the thinking that as a starting point, you might want to do in 2024 what you did in 2023. So we added enough money so we could probably do that. And again, this is all subject to what your vision is for this plan going forward. The third factor we considered what we're calling external forces or causes beyond anybody's control, or events or factors. For example, if the price of gasoline went up 30%, that's outside of our scope or our ability to control. And in previous years, those austerity years, we actually said to managers, show us a way that you're going to stay at 1%, even though fuel went up 10 or 15%. And so we were really looking at reduction of services and changing the way we deliver services. And in this case, in this 5-year plan, we haven't done that. So where there's cost drivers outside of our control, we've increased in most cases made an increase, in a couple of cases a decrease. But in most cases, we've increased those budget lines to accommodate those drivers. And then when department heads are presenting their budgets to you, I'd like them to say to you, we moved this line up from last year and here's why. So they'll point out to you where other factors have driven a cost increase. And the last item, fairly significant, we have a strategic plan. And that plan calls, so all the other 3 bullets there are all about doing the things that we always do, providing the same services we're providing today. And how do we provide them over the next 5 years? The 4th bullet is how do we do some other really cool stuff, things that we want to get done, that council wants to achieve. So we have a strategic work plan that mirrors the strategic plan. And staff have identified a number of projects and some associated costs, and those projects and their costs are reflected in the 5-year plan. So you'll see in the document in front of you, the spreadsheet document that Rosalind's going to speak to, she'll point out where you can find those costs. And then you've also got a strategic work plan document that shows you all of the projects that we think will achieve those strategic initiatives. So those are the factors that drove this budget. And again, where we are today is where staff has taken those considerations and said, we think this is what council, a starting point where council would want to start from in developing what will be your budget. So this isn't, we don't have any expectation it's going to be locked in. If you want to vote on it today, that would be cool. But I fully expect that, well, I want you to know that it was our intention to get you where we think you wanted to start from, okay? So don't think in any way that you're hurting our feelings by making changes to this budget. Important for you to know that in 2019, the city distributed taxes accordingly. About 60% to residential, 22.5% to industrial, and 17% to commercial. And council intentionally said, no, that distribution is we think is the right fit, and we moved all taxes up the same amount that year. And in the 2020 to 2024 draft plan that is in your hands, staff have projected maintaining that same distribution. So that means that if our tax assessment goes up, and it does in each of those 5 years, that this budget anticipates that tax increase is spread across all of those classes by the same percentage there. So if one class goes up 2%, they all would go up 2% in a rough sense. You should put your mind to that during the budget consideration process, and you may take input from different user groups or different taxpayer groups. You should put your mind to, is the distribution of taxes where you want it to be? And if it's not, let's talk about that and get to where you want it to be. So that's distribution of taxes. So this is what people really want to know is are taxes going up and how much? So this 5-year plan, obviously there's a number of things in there driven by the strategic plan that things we want to achieve to move the community forward. And that's going to cost some money. And so this plan estimates that increase in taxation will impact the average assessed single family residence by an increase of 5.1% in 2020. So if you own a home that is assessed at the average in the community, and Madam Mayor, you'll know what that is, your taxes will be driven by this budget, an increase of 5.1%. Okay? I would love to show you the projected impact on single-family residences over each of the 5 years. And we put our heads to that, and Rosalind can tell you with greater accuracy why we can't do that. But to project what's going to happen to basically the assessed value in the community beyond 2020 would not be responsible. There's too many variables. And we look backwards at previous years, and it was fairly volatile up and down. So we don't think we can project with accuracy what the impact on single-family residences will be beyond 2020. We know that this 5-year plan projects budget increases or taxation increases in each of those years. In 2021, a budget taxation increase in the same magnitude or similar magnitude as this, but we just don't have the data around the tax base to tell you with certainty what that is. And Madam Mayor, you got a question already?
I was just going to comment that I think you're a little bit saying that we don't know what the average home will be, what the increase will be. And I think what we have to, it's the non-market change that we can't capture. So we can't capture how many new builds there will be. We can't capture, it's not about, how much my home goes up or down compared to the average. It's how much new units how many new units will be on the market and where that comes in.
Thank you.
Non-market change.
Non-market change, thank you. So some documents that you have in your hands. I'm going to turn over to Rosalind, and she's going to walk you through what those documents are. And again, if you have questions around how you should use those documents, this would be the right time to do that. If you have questions about a value in a certain line, we'd prefer you save that for other budget meetings. Although, that being said, it's your meeting. You can ask whatever questions you like. Rosalind? Tag.
This is my budget. That's middle one. Middle one. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm not too sure how familiar you are with any of the budget documents, some of you being new, myself being very new to this process. So I kind of wanted to walk you through Just some housekeeping notes. The paper documents you have in front of you will slightly change from the electronic version. In the electronic version, you will have 2019 as your basis, your guideline. In these paper copies, you don't have that right now, so my apologies. That will be in your electronic copy. And I also do have the capital projects in a separate document as well for you to review. So if you just want to open your booklets up, I'll kind of walk you through a little bit about understanding some of the documents in here. I do have on the first page is a consolidated version. So the consolidated version here is basically you're taking your revenues and expenses. Sorry, here I'm going to skip ahead. Your revenues and your expenditures in aggregate. So this is total, all departments, and includes all capital funding. You'll see there's an access line of revenue over or under expenses. So that's basically your what we're using here to balance. Sometimes you're going to be over an expense. Sometimes you're going to have excess revenue. That's balanced out by other proceeds, such as debt proceeds or transfers from other reserve funds. So as you're walking through and you're looking at your revenues and expenses, and we do have an overage or an underage, you'll see that it's balanced by those other reserves. And we'll go into detail on the reserves at our financial presentations. So I'm going to move on. Your next page here is the General Revenue Fund. So as you're walking through this document, keep in mind that it does have all our general operational revenue from our normal activities. It also does have any of our grant funding we're going to be receiving in the following year that's guaranteed. We have our utility tax, as well as other provincial funding like community gaming as well. So I'll flip over to our general expenditures. So in general expenditures, we've tried here to go ahead and highlight most of the strategic priorities. I see you're all flipping through, and I want to say this starts on page, I think it goes back here to page 1. Yeah. So on the expenditures, we've highlighted anything that is a strategic priority, so you can make sure that that is within our operational budget for any operating items. And in here also includes any of your debt expense, operational expense, and yearly transfers required to reserve funds. So anything that we're contributing to our equipment reserve funds will also be shown as an expenditure. Any capital expenditures funded through operations are also shown on this page. Does anyone have any questions so far? We've all found the page? Sorry guys for the numbering on there. So this, the expenditures start again on page 1. So you're going to have to flip through the revenue pages. The revenue pages end on page 5, and then you start again on page 1.
The expense pages, the account numbers, the numbers start with 2s.
Yes, they start with 2s. You might have to
You're
go
on the
back.
wrong page. Try again.
Yeah, it's a consolidated document, so it didn't let me change any of the numbering, guys, so I'm totally having you run all around here. My apologies.
There's several page 1s. Look for a different page 1.
It should be about, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages in. You've gone too far if you're looking at the colored pages.
No.
No.
No, it's not.
But we'll get there. So at the so that's your expenditures. So, and I've also attached your water and sewer funds, act in a similar fashion. So they're going to have your incoming revenues, they're going to have your operational expenses, and again, they're going to explain to you any excess revenue or expenditure over your water or sewer accounts are going to come into transfers from reserves or into reserves. So as you're looking through and you're wondering how things are balancing, we do a transfer to reserves or from reserves, depending if there's an excess or a shortage in there. So similar fashion as the consolidated statement that you see. Thank you, Twyla. Page 1 the third time. Absolutely. Just to keep everyone on their toes.
I think we got it.
Okay.
I think
awesome.
we got it
now. Okay. We do have a capital document as well in front of you. So I'll skip to that one, which is a separate document. So hopefully there'll be no confusion on the pages. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the capital schedule, just so you know how that works. Is it okay if I flash back to that PowerPoint presentation for a moment? Thank you very much. So the capital plan document you have in front of you, whoops. There we go. So it is going to include all projects from 2020 to 2024. They are sorted by year and by fund. So they're going to span some projects that span over multiple funds, such as, let's talk about maybe road construction, sewer construction, water construction, relining, and such like that. This year, we've all included that single project on one line that includes all the funds. So as you're going through, just consider that. We have also created a separate table for your strategic priorities as well. And if you flip back to your wonderful numbered package there, at the very end, we do have a tax summary. So as CAO Ply was speaking earlier, we do have a average single-family residence increase of 5.1%. So this is based off net taxable values we receive from BC Assessment. And we also look at our class multipliers as well and take into account the tax increase for the year against all other classes that it's applicable for. So that being said, we also take our newly developed homes and construction, which is our new market change, into factor, as well as that average price of the single home to create that 5.1% number. So for future years, that is a hard number to predict. I do hope to work with BC Assessment to see if they do have any trending information to find out if trending that and getting you a 5-year look of that is possible, and what numbers or statistics they'd have available to do that. So that being said, does anyone have any questions or about the document or how to read any of the pages that they've received? I know it's a lot to take in, a lot to look at.
Councillor Paulson.
I don't want to get into real depth into this until we've had a chance to look it over a week or two. But for instance, the sand group is moving onto the property at the old Catalyst site. That will obviously be the tax rate as they build and get up to operation will be reflected in another category somewhere in here.
So our assessments are always based on the year behind.
Okay.
So that's going to come into effect in year 2021. We'll receive the 2020 estimates. They may be included in new market change depending where they are, but then they will be put into whatever, if it's a light industrial class, they'll be put in there for taxation or wherever they fall. Yeah, so that would be reflected next year. Yeah.
Councillor Solda.
Maybe I'm reading this wrong, so maybe you can correct me. On page 2, which says real property taxes, says 5.85% for an increase, right? Tax levy. But we're reading 5.1. What am I reading wrong here?
Okay. So you may be looking at our general tax revenue increase. Is that correct? You're on page 2?
Page 2, yes.
Yeah, and you're looking at the general purpose taxes? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so our general purpose taxes are taxes as a whole, not based on net taxable values provided by BC Assessment. Okay. This is strictly just looking at taxation from the numbers based in our operational plan. So that'll include all of our calculations based on the revenue and the expenses.
Okay, so
and
the 5.1 is what we're supposed to be looking basically at.
The 5.1 is looking at single-family residents and the impact on them. This is the 5.9% is basically the number speaking, looking at the tax number as a whole, not applying it to the public.
Okay,
yeah.
I got it. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be clear.
Yep,
The difference
absolutely.
between how much our budget actually increases every year is different than how much it actually impacts the average home.
Right.
Yep. Other questions from council?
Oh, boy.
Okay, just to
Okay.
start. So if I'm reading this, this capital project list correctly, then the ones at the top are 2020. So this year, capital projects in blue that are from our strategic plan, correct?
Correct.
And then there's more blue ones down here. These are starting in 2021.
Absolutely. So it'll go by year, and then you list your strategic priorities in a separate table, and then your operational ones.
And the ones that, so in the first piece of that, it shows, general revenue. If we look at this 2021 project, general revenue, key-to-key trail system, 1.1 million, 338,000 from gas tax. Total project expenditure, 1.5 million. So
Yes,
as a, just general, that would mean that we would be taxing 1.1 million for that project in 2021.
Correct.
And then 388,000 not taxing for it.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
just making sure I'm understanding the structure of the document.
That was great. Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think this is a great start to a lot of information for us to review. And I appreciate how we've broken it down to show, what is from our strategic plan and what really is just day-to-day business, doing what we're doing and making sure we're maintaining our assets appropriately. So thank you for the information and all of the work that I would imagine managers have all put into this to get it ready in November. It's still November, so let's just take a minute to appreciate that it's November and we have a budget in front of us. If there are no additional questions, then I think we can probably just move receipt of this document to start.
Madam Mayor, the joy's not over. We have a couple more slides.
Okay, come on back up.
Sorry.
Great.
Jake, Jamie.
Okay.
Do you want me to take this on?
I'll take it from here if you like.
You want it? Okay.
Sure.
Perfect.
Just one slide for me, Madam Mayor, the strategic work plan. So you have another document in your hands with the larger page with green. So as the mayor just pointed out, in the budget document you were just looking at, there are some identified strategic plan capital projects. There's also other strategic initiatives that are not in the capital budget, but they're in the operating budget. And there's also a number of strategic initiatives that are utilizing funds and staff that were already envisioned in the 5-year plan. So this document it essentially shows our strategic plan, the goals and the strategies, and then it identifies a number of tasks that staff think will fulfill those strategies. and it provides a timeline and a dialogue around who's responsible for those and whether or not new funding is required. So that's a lot of information.
Well, there's a lot of information in here definitely to look over. So
Yes.
are these documents, since they weren't in the agenda, will they be available on our website?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So we found a couple of typos, and we're going to fix those, and I'm hoping by the end of today we'll have them available on the city's website.
Okay.
We're just going to show you this other document briefly. No, it's a different document altogether. It's in the same folder. If we go to, oh, that's all right, nobody's watching. It's not in there. No, okay, sorry. It's not available, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. But I would like to point out that in the back of this document, there's a number of initiatives in the strategic plan. In the back of that green document, there's a reference to an increase in 4 staff positions. So if we're going to complete the work, if we're going to continue to provide all the services we provide, and we're also going to add in strategic initiative work, we're going to have to put in more money in the budget, and we're going to need more staff resources. So the 5-year plan that you have in your hands includes the costs of 2 new positions and 2 positions increased from part-time to full-time. And we believe that those are critical to being able to complete those tasks. And when department heads present their department plans to you over the next next week, that'll be a time to engage with them about those resources.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from council on the strategic plan document?
Thank you for getting us started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
There's just a few more slides. Okay, so
Never
everyone
ends.
knows. Next step. So we're going to have the departmental presentations, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and some external organizations come on the 10th. And then we'll ask to consider first reading January 13th.
Okay.
Suspense. So here's the remainder of our time frame as well. January 14th, public engagement, and March 23rd, 2nd and 3rd reading, and then final adoption, April 14th. And adoption deadline is May 15th, you guys, just so you know.
Okay. Is that the last slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And that is the start to budget. Okay, I think we will take you know what? We will do the manager's report, and then we will take our break, our recess. So come on forward. That's right. Usually we do make Director of Parks, Recreation, and Heritage wait until after our break, but...
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Merry Christmas to you as well. You have my monthly report in front of you there, and I'd like to take a moment and talk about the chiller. So Friday afternoon, Technical Safety BC lifted our stop work order, and staff have been working very hard, and you'll see, thanks to our Manager of Communications, posting online. We're in the midst of installing ice at this stage. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank community again for their patience. A lot of positive feedback online. It really gave staff the sense that we're sort of all trying to pull in the same direction, and we're trying to achieve the same goal, as opposed to the city being defiant or in opposition to the community. It's in everyone's best interest when our facilities function well, so it's very exciting to see things moving forward. We're also excited to welcome the Bulldogs home this weekend, so they will be playing at home Saturday night, as well as Winter Wonderland starts next Tuesday. So at this stage, we have 15 sponsored Everyone Welcome skates throughout the month of December, both before and after Christmas. And we already have 50 different user groups. So those are schools and private rentals and all sorts of other user groups as well. So we're talking about the opportunity for about 9,000 or so Port Alberni residents getting the opportunity to enjoy Winter Wonderland. So we're very excited to welcome folks starting this weekend back on the ice. And if council has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Okay. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if I think this is an obvious question, but in the aftermath of this, will there be an opportunity to sit down and do a review or a prospectus on this particular situation in our facility with Safety Tech BC? And I think probably where I'm going at with this is, and this is only me from the outside looking in, but it's inexcusable that that process took 25 days. And I get the safety, I understand that, I understand what happened in Fernie years ago, but I think there was a point where things kind of stalled out, and I think for other communities that may be after us, or if we ever have anything like this in the future, we need to condense that analysis, the repair or the remedy to final conclusion from Safety Tech BC. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, and I know that our staff did everything that they were required to do. It's just when you get into that bureaucratic process and the economic impact that this had on our community, I don't think anybody has the numbers yet, but it's phenomenal. And I'm thinking that probably the economic impact of having that building closed was probably $500,000 or more in our community in general revenue. But long question, is there a plan to be able to sit down with Safety Tech BC and kind of do an attack plan or a review of this situation in any situations that may be in the future?
So, Madam Mayor, I'll touch on two items to that. And first of all, from an internal process standpoint, we will offer an after-action review with our staff. So a debrief specifically with staff that were involved to ensure that there's internal learnings and those lessons learned we can use from an internal standpoint. Regarding Technical Safety BC, I predict two things happening there. First of all, sitting down with them and having discussions around potentials for any time you can streamline these processes. This is the first time that the manufacturer, who has hundreds of these chillers in operation, who have had a patent for over 10 years for this technology, no one had seen this situation before. So there's obviously lots of information to glean from that. So I see us working in concert with Technical Safety BC about that. As well, there's lots of chatter already about anytime there's any sort of an incident that's out of the norm, reviewing regulation at a provincial level, and as Technical Safety BC is the regulator across the province, I predict that there may be some updates to the current regulation as well, based on this situation that we've had. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just one last comment, and whether it be through Madam Mayor or through yourself, I really want to make sure that we, in a grandiose way, thank Campbell River and Oceanside for hosting the Bulldogs on those two games. I went to both games, and both communities were so engaged and so involved. And like Campbell River was like a carnival, and it was incredible. And Oceanside had a huge presence of youth and minor hockey in the rink that night, and I think it was a great exposure to that style of hockey. But those two communities really stepped to the plate for us, Campbell River, early on in the process. I got an email from an acquaintance in Campbell River like the first day saying we'll try and get ice for you. So I just hope that you will relay that, maybe even to the mayor and to your counterparts in those communities, because it was incredible what they did on short notice too, and packed to the rafters. It was great to see. Anyway, thank you.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, absolutely, we'll reach out to those communities, and we'll actually be offering an additional city-sponsored Everyone Welcome skate at the multiplex to welcome our community back to the ice as well.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Despite our revenue losses in the year, is there still that word called warranty? Is that still floating around out there?
Absolutely, it is, Madam Mayor. That is top of mind. Once we are fully operational, and of course our resources at this stage are focused on getting us operational. So Weyerhaeuser Rink is looking great. Coulson is short behind. Once we are fully functional again, absolutely our conversation will turn to the manufacturer, specifically on this chiller that has a useful life still of 19 and a half years, what that warranty might look like. So at this stage, we're functioning under the 10-year warranty that it came with, and we will have additional conversations with the manufacturer.
Thank you. Other questions from council? None? Okay. Thank you very much for your report. And just want to say one more time, thank you to you and your staff, Rob Cranevalt and everyone who worked very hard, and to our manager of communications as well for keeping the public really in the loop. And your daily emails were very appreciated. And well, but you know, it's important to update even when there is nothing to report, because I think that if the public saw anything, it was that the city was on top of it and working as hard as they can from every angle to make sure that, you know, we got the situation rectified and were able to make ice as soon as possible. So definitely a job well done by staff. So thank you. Okay. Would somebody like to move receipt of this report?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now we will take a 10-minute recess. Okay, we have everyone? We do have everyone. Great. Okay, no bylaws, so correspondence for action. Item 1, we have a letter dated November 12, 2019 from the City of Victoria requesting support for their resolutions to the provincial government regarding the opioid crisis across the province. Councillor Poon, would you like to read this one?
Sure. I move that the letter from Mayor Helps, City of Victoria, dated November 12, 2019, requesting support of their resolutions to the provincial government regarding the opioid crisis be received, and council direct staff to provide a letter of support to the provincial government.
Second, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the letter? Councillor Corbeil?
Well, I would just like to point out that the letter talks about safer drug supply and inhalation sites, but it doesn't talk about treatment facilities, and that's, you know, it always seems like we miss the main issue in this, and I think Mr. Douglas was kind of referring to treatment sites, and I have no problem endorsing their letter, but I just want to point out that there is definitely a lack of treatment facilities, and when you hear the professionals that deal with these people, it takes, you know, sometimes weeks, if not months, to get somebody into a facility, and you know, during that period of time, so much has happened that you know, it may be too late to get the person into the facility. So, anyways, just to point out that the letter lacks the treatment facility.
Takes months and months unless you have $30,000 to $50,000, then you can get in right away. So it's a system that's not working. And we certainly could add into our letter, if council supports that, a request for the provincial government to invest in treatment facilities as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so seeing consensus around that. I don't think we need to make an actual amendment to that. We can just add it in. Okay, so moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. And item 2, an email dated November 20th, 2019 from Kevin Goldsberry requesting council consider changing the relocation code for recycled homes to reflect the codes of other communities.
municipalities, sorry. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read that one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that the email dated November 20th, 2019, requesting council consider changing the relocation code for recycled homes to reflect the codes of other municipalities be received, and that the council for the city of Port Alberni direct staff to bring forward a report and recommendations for council's consideration.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. And are there any questions on this? Councillor Paulson, you're in my blind spot.
Yeah, okay. Boy, selective hearing. I just wonder if Caitlin could maybe,
She's not, oh, she is.
this, or not Caitlin, our planner could,
Manager of Planning.
manager
Caitlin.
of planning, Caitlin, if you could, this is all foreign to me, so I don't quite know what they're talking about or what they're asking about.
So we are asking for a report, which will probably bring some information, but if we're wondering if it's, you know, worth staff time to get a report, if we
Yeah.
want to hear just a really general kind of overview from Manager of Planning, if she's prepared.
I don't want to send you to do a report if I don't think
Yeah.
you need to do it.
Nope, thank,
For sure.
I appreciate that. Efficiency is great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So, yeah, the issue before you really is just, I guess, a question of matter of whether you want to entertain the idea of changing the building bylaw to remove a clause about the relocation of buildings and structures from one area of town to another area of town, or from out of town into town. My discussions with staff have kind of led me to believe that it's probably wise to have this clause in our building code. There's, I think, probably impacts to the quality of housing that would be brought in or relocated to town if we were to remove that. There's probably impacts to the building industry as well that we would need to consider. So my initial reaction, without further deeper investigation, is it's probably not wise to take that out, but that's council's choice to direct us how they want to direct us.
Thank you very much.
Are there questions or comments from other? Councillor Corbeil?
Well, as the writer describes, that by recycling homes, you prevent the homes going into the landfill, and it just seems so wasteful. And many of these homes are coming from the Lower Mainland. I know of several that have been moved over here. There's been houses in Port Alberni over the years have been moved. That is probably prior to this bylaw, but I think it's really worth looking at, especially if other communities are doing this. I don't think anybody's going to purchase some dumpy old house and move it across the strait to move to Port Alberni. So I wouldn't be too concerned about bringing down the value of the land. And I think you actually point out that it's got to have more than 1.25% value than the adjoining homes. I read that somewhere. So yeah, I'm in favor of investigating this.
Councillor Solda?
I remember the Estavilla having a home there, and they moved it from A to B to somewhere else, and it looks great now. I'm just wondering, right now, can anybody apply to move a home from A to B and to the city, and would it be by case, or they just can't move the home?
So I think this is the kind of thing that we will get
We'll
in
get
our
the
report,
report?
and I
Okay.
believe currently you can do it, but you do have to meet current building code, which is the challenge. So what they're asking is that we look at what other communities are doing, which is a little bit less stringent, and there's some specific requirements around it. I'm supportive of getting a report on this, largely for the reasons that Councillor Corbeil noted. While I do think we want to make sure we're cautious, and we do have regulations to make sure that we're not bringing in houses that are not, in fitting with the neighborhood. I think it's also important for us to remember that we are the worst on Vancouver Island for waste diversion.
And not that we would necessarily be taking down a house in Port Alberni and moving it to somewhere else in Port Alberni, but that could be a situation that happens. And so we actually divert the least amount of waste from the landfill in all of Vancouver Island in our regional district. And that's something that the regional district is really working hard to reduce that number or increase the diversion number to improve our waste numbers. So I think this is potentially a step to support the direction the regional district is going, and kind of in keeping with more of a regional planning perspective. I think this, at least investigating this, is in line with what the direction our region's going. I think we've had it moved and seconded. Yes. Any further questions before we vote on if we get a report? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And lastly, an email dated November 21st, 2019 from Margaret Lamb, early childhood educator, co-owner and operator, requesting a letter of support to accompany their grant application for funding to open a childcare center at 5100 Thibault Avenue. Councillor Solda, would you like to read this one?
Yes. Madam Mayor, I'll move that the email dated November 21st, 2019, requesting a letter of support to accompany their grant application for funding to open a childcare center at 5100 Thibault Avenue be received, and that council directs staff to prepare a letter of support.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, there are no proclamations, so on to informational correspondence. City Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So you have the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission minutes for your information. You have correspondence from the board chair of Board of Education speaking to the potential of renaming School District 70, including a couple of secondary school and an elementary school. They do invite public feedback, so if anybody has an opinion on that and they want to share it with the school district, the email their address is contained in the letter itself. And then you have correspondence from Amelia Duquette, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, looking to have a letter of support accompany their application for a civic forfeiture grant on crime prevention. Staff do plan on meeting with the letter writer, and they're looking at a date in early December. Following that meeting, if there is additional requirement on the part of council, we would bring that back to council at the meeting in January. And then the fourth piece of correspondence is from the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, and that was written to the Safety Officer of Technical Safety BC about the multiplex arena.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any items you'd like to speak to? So I'd like to just comment on the item 2 from Pam Craig. I note that the two names they've suggested for A.W. Neal are Compton and Kitsuxis Elementary. And I wonder if we should, now I don't know if there's significance to Kitsuxis. I think it is an Indigenous word, I've been told. But I wonder if we should submit feedback and encourage them to look for a local, meaningful word or name to use or to name this school for. And I don't have any specific suggestions. I don't love Compton or Kitsuxis as a name for the school. And it might just be worth us taking a bit of time and submitting some feedback. I think following on renaming naming our road Nupsi Kapis, I think they could do some engagement and work with our local First Nations if they're looking for a First Nation name. Maybe take an approach that gives us something a bit more unique than just the crossroad. CAO?
Madam Mayor, I'm always hesitant to reach into another government's business or level of governments. However,
provide feedback.
However, we have really good recommendations from the city's reconciliation committee, so I think it could be appropriate to reach out and say, hey, we learned this from our reconciliation committee. It's a recommendation you might want to consider.
Yep. I think it would be valuable to pass along that recommendation from that committee. And Pam actually did engage in our committee a few times, so she's quite familiar with it. you know, that's for renaming city spaces and parks and that kind of thing, but I think it's definitely relevant to a school as well, and if the opportunity is in front of us, I think we could definitely pass that along as our feedback. Any other comments? Unless anyone here really loves Compton or Kitsaksis Elementary.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Okay, so we will submit that recommendation as our feedback. Okay, any other items people would like to speak to? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Paulson, would you like to move receipt?
I would like to move receipt that the informational correspondence items numbered 1 through 4 be received and filed.
Is there a seconder? Okay, all in favor? Carried. No report from in camera, so on to council reports. Any items people would like to highlight? Councillor Corbeil?
Yeah, in my report, I did not mention that the Alberni Valley Community Forest is hosting an open house on Friday, November 29th from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's at 7500 Airport Road out at the airport. And as well, on Friday, the 29th, from 10 a.m. till 12 noon at 7500 Airport Road, there will be a meeting with the recreational user groups and individuals, and they're invited to come and discuss recreational use and recreational planning on the community forest lands.
Thank you. Councillor Poon?
I just want to highlight how poorly attended the committee of the whole was, and I feel like we should reserve these committees of the whole for topics that bring out more people and perhaps are less technical in nature.
Thank you. Any other items councillors would like to highlight? I got a couple items.
I'm sure you do.
What about you, Councillor? Councillor Paulson?
I am here to defend myself that I did do a report, but it sat in my outbasket for 5 days before I finally sent it yesterday afternoon.
He has the proof of it right here.
Yeah. But you know what? I'll just put that in with the next council meetings and call it a day.
That's great. Councillor Washington, anything for yourself? Okay. Okay. I just wanted to speak briefly to my trip to Anakala last week for the visit with the Premier. And I wanted to first just start by thanking the Premier and his staff, as well as Minister Fraser and his staff, for taking the time to actually drive that road and, you know, come quite a distance to attend that meeting and really get a sense of what the road was like. That said, the road was significantly better than we've ever seen it before. Never seen it graded like that. The Premier was coming. But it is, I think it did give him a really good sense of the condition of that road. And out of that meeting, there was a commitment to form a working group with members who were there, as well as provincial staff, to talk about the most pressing safety improvements and kind of start to develop a budget for those. So I do feel very confident that, you know, while the road may not be paved in the next few years, I do feel really confident that safety improvements and significant safety improvements will be made to that road. So just want to thank Huayet and Chief Robert Dennis for organizing that meeting and for including the city in it as well. And then the other thing that I wanted to speak to was I did speak at the high school last week to 2 groups of all of the grade 8s, and just wanted to really thank those students, if any of them are watching, because I hear that some of them do watch council meetings. I was quite impressed for the really thoughtful questions that they had, and I think we can all be incredibly proud of the young people that we have in our community and just how engaged they are and in wanting to actually learn and understand what's going on, not just in our higher levels of government, but locally at the city as well. Got some really good questions. Got asked in both groups about what the city is doing about being the 17th most dangerous city in Canada, because that report came out the day before. And just some really good comments about suggestions that they had for what they felt that we could be doing or should be doing, and different groups we should be working with. So we have a really great group of engaged young people in our community. And the other thing that they did let me know is that one of their grade 8 classes is doing a project right now, collecting scarves and mittens and other things to donate to pass out before Christmas to people in our community who are homeless and need our support. So I thought that was a really wonderful. They've got some posters. They're going to come and bring a collection box to the city, and they are, it was one of the students' ideas, and they're coordinating it on their own. So quite wonderful. Councillor Haggard.
I know last year we had discussed about having a council meeting at the high school, and I know because of scheduling it didn't work out. Can you maybe reconsider that again for this year?
Absolutely.
I did talk to a teacher at the high school, and he thought that was a wonderful idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I think that's definitely something we can coordinate for this year. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Haggard, would you like to move receipt of our reports?
I move that the council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to the city's business be received.
Second, Madam Mayor. All in favor? Carried. And no new business. On to question period. Would any members of the public like to ask questions? Come on forward, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. It's back to my question earlier on, and I want to make it clear that I'm wanting to understand what we're doing here in this community and how we're approaching those 4 issues which interact everything else we're trying to do. Everything.
Yep.
Like Mr. Ply, our CEO, mentioned a 5.1% tax interest to move communities forward. Well, as long as we don't address these problems, our community is not going to move forward very fast. And it makes many other communities, if I may, just before we get into the question, many other communities are facing the same problems. It's not just common to us. And unfortunately, city councils are left to deal with things that should be dealt with other government officials. But the bad media makes us more responsible for standing up and holding people accountable and asking for people for assistance. And I'm talking about federal, provincial, government diplomats, etc., and other communities. And the unemployment, the homeless, the addictions, and the resultant crime is an issue that we have to make a major importance. And I don't know what we're doing, and so I'm not pointing fingers, okay? And again, the 5.1% tax increase, I think I can predict what the next 4 years are going to be. They're going to be at least a minimum of 4 to 5.1%. And unless we start getting people who will want to come to our community because they think it's safe and a place to be, that residential tax is not going to get any better. We need people to pay more taxpayers. So my question is, to make it short, is what is happening through council in our community to deal with those 4 issues? Again, realizing it's a huge problem, it's complicated. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be very aggressive in finding solutions and getting the government officials down here to talk about it. Get them in a room if we have to. And I'm going to be talking to them about my concerns, and I'm sure you all haven't at different times done that. So if I may just have your response.
For sure. It's obviously a very big question, for sure. So there's a lot of pieces to it. I believe that housing is a really critical piece of, reducing crime in our community. We are making significant progress on housing, whether that's through the 5 approved BC housing projects we have in our community for an array of different supportive housing and affordable housing for women and children fleeing abusive relationship, or the market housing coming to the communities as well. We do have approved 150 units for apartment buildings, that kind of thing. We are working with, of course, I know you mentioned earlier that it's not just a police problem, but we do believe that the police, of course, are a huge piece of this, and that we have to support them in their side of reducing crime in the community as well. But it is just one aspect. So we are working with the provincial government to get more provincially funded RCMP officers in our community. And then, of course, our budget last year did increase the policing budget as well. And a big piece of that is we're also trying to streamline some of our processes to make sure that we're getting the full value out of the officers that we have. So we made a change last year to the community policing officer is now going to be a municipal position, and that's freeing up one more officer to be actually working on the ground. So some of those changes are going to be coming through our strategic plan. So you'll see in the first year of our budget, we do have the public safety building that we're going to be working on. That's kind of a change in structure to community policing, to how we do bylaws in the community, and a few other things as well. So that's a piece. And then on provincial and federal, we have a meeting set up with our MP. Actually, we're working on coordinating a meeting with all of the mayors in the community, in our riding, as well as our MP, to talk about housing, public safety, and other issues. And then on the provincial side of things, when I was able to spend a bit of time with the Premier last week, he invited me down to Victoria and asked for a list of ministers that I'd like to meet with. So on that list is Minister of Public Safety, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and Minister of Health. And I think those are three really critical ministers that we need to be spending more time with to start addressing some of these issues in our community. We'll be meeting with the Premier as well, but it's, they're all huge things that are not going to change overnight. And I could probably list quite a few other things that we are working on, or that other agencies, are working on in our community. We announced a CMHA program for cleanup in our community. We think that that's an important piece of public safety. There's a lot more, and it requires just more conversation. But those are a few things that we are personally working on.
Yeah. And all of them certainly have a huge value. And I also realize there's a lot of community members who have meetings regarding these same issues. I'm still not hearing anything that's going to make anything significant. And I really do believe, this may sound far-fetched, that we've got to get a hold of each party member, get them in a room, and tell them what we want done, not what we'd like to have done. We are going down unless we start putting pressure on these politicians who refuse, I'm talking federally, to deal with things like addictions, homelessness, and the other problems that are unemployment. I'm tired of hearing it every 4 years. I wanted a commitment, and I couldn't make the meeting, and then I didn't realize there was one in town. I want a commitment from them in some of these issues, that we'd like to see this happening, and that's all we're hearing. And I'm really setting my foot into this, so I'm going to talk to every one of the party members, and I wouldn't mind meeting with someone from council if you're willing to give some feedback on what I find from them. I still don't have the feeling that we're being aggressive enough in getting the responses that we need from these people who are in the position to make changes. I understand when I say the police, their hands are tied behind the courts aren't even functioning properly for us, and I think council's hands are also tied behind their back. I'm not saying that we couldn't be doing more as a municipality, but I'm just in the force of trying to find out what is and isn't happening. I thought we would have had a written plan as how we were going to deal with it, and that doesn't seem to be there yet. But suffice for now. But it's I don't see a future in Port Alberni. I see a big change in the last few years, especially on 3rd Avenue. I see progress. Other people may not, a lot of people do, but we're going nowhere unless we start dealing with these 4 problems. And we're stymied, we're in limbo. And that bothers me. So thanks very much for giving me the time.
Thank you. Would any other members of the public like to speak? We do have one other member of the public here still.
thank the ones that came on behalf of the Owls Path Canada Foundation to our fundraiser, our language poll, language revitalization poll fundraiser gala. It was a great turnout, and I'm glad that some of you guys were able to make it.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks for hosting. Okay, so with that, would somebody like to move adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Carried.